How do you heal from grief when your heart still hurts? Maybe healing isn't the absence of pain. Maybe it's learning how to keep living while your heart is still breaking. Because grief doesn't always leave when the tears stop. Sometimes healing begins while your heart is still carrying the pain.
Every story's got a spark, and every spark's got a name. This is the journey of finding mine. Who am I when the lights go low? Who am I when the world says no? Searching through my past, trying to free my soul, one truth at a time, letting every story unfold.
How do you heal from grief when your heart still hurts? No, really. How? How do you keep going when parts of you still feel stuck in the moment everything changed? How do you smile when something inside you still aches? How do you move forward when your heart keeps looking backwards? Just sit with that. Because people love to talk about healing, but they rarely talk about the kind of healing that happens while you're still hurting. They talk about peace. They talk about closure. They talk about moving on. They talk about strength. But here's the truth nobody says enough. Sometimes healing does not begin when the pain leaves. Sometimes healing begins while the pain is still there. See, that's the part. That's the part because a lot of people assume if your heart still hurts, then you must not be healing. But that's not always true. Sometimes you are healing and grieving. Sometimes you are growing and crying. Sometimes you are functioning and falling apart in private. Sometimes you are breathing, praying, showing up, trying, and surviving. And still carrying pain in places nobody can see. And here's the contrarian truth for this episode. A hurting heart is not always a sign that you are broken. Sometimes it is a sign that you love deeply. That changes the whole conversation. Because now grief is no longer just pain. Now grief becomes evidence. Evidence that something mattered. Evidence that someone mattered. Evidence that your heart formed a bond so real that even loss could not erase its impact. And today I want to walk through this carefully, not quickly, not shallowly, not with cliches. Because there are some people listening right now who are still carrying grief quietly. Some of you lost a person. Some of you lost a relationship. Some of you lost a little fur baby. Some of you lost a dream. Some of you lost a version of your life you thought you would still have. And maybe outwardly, you look okay, but inwardly, your heart is still asking, how do I heal from something that still hurts? And that's where we're going today. This is the Who Am I podcast, and I am your host, Jeff Hopgood. This is a space where we pause, we reflect, we breathe, and ask the deeper question life forces us to face. Not who people think we should be, not who pain tries to convince us we are, not who loss leaves us feeling like, but who we really are underneath the weight, underneath the wound, underneath the unanswered questions. And today's episode is a tender one, a real one, a needed one, because today we're talking about grief. Not just grief as a word, not just grief as a passing emotion, not just grief as something people mention at funerals and then move on from. We're talking about grief as a human experience, a mental experience, an emotional experience, a spiritual experience, a physical experience, an identity shifting experience. Today, we're going to be talking about how do you heal from grief when your heart still hurts. Because if we're honest, many people are not struggling with whether healing is possible. They are struggling with how to heal when the pain has not fully let go of them. And that's what I want us to talk through gently, honestly, deeply. So before we go any deeper, let's do something that we do here. Let's pause for a moment. I want to check in with you. How is your heart today? And I'm not looking for your public answer, not the answer you give to people when they ask how you're doing. And you automatically says, I'm good. I mean, really, how is your heart? Has grief been sitting quietly in the background? Have you been carrying pain you have not named out loud? Have you been strong for everybody else while privately feeling emotionally exhausted? Have you had moments where you were okay 1 minute and then a memory, a song, a scent, a date, or a thought hit you, and suddenly the heaviness returned? How is your mind today? Is it restless, foggy, tired, numb, overthinking, trying to process a loss that still doesn't feel real? How is your soul today? Do you feel connected or distant? Do you feel grounded or shaken? Do you feel hopeful, or you just trying to make it through one day at a time? Take a breath. Wherever you are in your healing journey, I want you to know something from the start. You do not have to perform strength here. You do not have to pretend your heart is further along than it really is. You do not have to rush yourself through pain just to make other people comfortable. You do not have to rush yourself through pain just to make other people comfortable. This space is for honesty. And if your heart still hurts, you are in the right conversation. So, one of the hardest things about grief is that it doesn't always announce itself loudly. Sometimes grief is obvious. Sometimes it comes with tears, breakdowns, and visible pain. But sometimes grief is subtle. Sometimes it shows up as emotional exhaustion. Sometimes it shows up as irritability. It shows up as numbness. It can show up as a loss of motivation. It can show up as mental fog, and sometimes it shows up as smiling in public and unraveling in private. And because it doesn't always look dramatic, people sometimes don't realize how deeply they are hurting. And I think that's where emotional storytelling becomes real, because grief is often not just in the moment of loss, it lives in the after. That's the part people don't prepare you for. See, they may prepare you for the funeral, they may prepare you for the phone call, they may prepare you for the bad news, they may even prepare you for the shock, but nobody really prepares you for the after. See, the after is quiet. The after is when everybody goes home. The after is when the calls slow down. The after is when the flowers dry up. The after is when the routine changes. The after is when the reality starts settling in to places your mind had not yet caught up to. See, the after is when you reach for what used to be there and no longer is. See, the after is when your body remembers habits your heart can no longer fulfill. You think about calling them. You think about texting them. You think about hearing their voice. You think about sharing the news with them. You think about what they would have said. You think about what life was before the loss interrupted everything. And the painful part is that grief is not always just about the person. Sometimes grief is also about the version of you that existed when they were here. The version of you that laughed more easily. The version of you that felt safer. The version of you that still believed certain things were permanent. The version of you that had not yet been introduced to this kind of absence. See, that's why grief is so layered. It is not always just the I miss them. Sometimes it is, I miss who I was before this happened. And that is a different kind of ache because now you are not only grieving a loss, you are also grieving a disruption of identity. And once you understand that, you begin to realize that grief is not just emotional pain, it is psychological. It affects how we think, how we process, how we remember, how we attach, and how we experience safety in the world. So let's go there for a moment. Let's talk about the psychology of grief and why it hurts so deeply. Because sometimes people judge themselves harshly in grief simply because they do not understand what grief is. Grief is not only sadness, it is the mind and heart trying to adjust to a reality they did not want. Let me say that again. Grief is the mind and heart trying to adjust to a reality they did not want. And that adjustment can feel violent internally. Why? Because our brains are built around attachment routine and expectation. We attach to people, we build habits around them, we build emotional pathways around them, we build meaning around them, we build futures, expectations around them. So when loss happens, the brain does not instantly know how to stop expecting what it has been used to receiving. That's why grief can feel disorienting. That's why it can feel surreal. That's why people sometimes say it still doesn't feel real. That's why certain moments can trigger deep emotional waves out of nowhere. Because grief is not just about a memory. It's about attachment. And attachment is powerful. See, when someone or something meaningful become part of your emotional world, your nervous system recognizes that bond. So when the loss happens, your entire system can react. Not just your emotions, your body too. Your sleep may change, your appetite may change, your concentration may change, your motivation may drop, your energy may dip, your patience may thin out. You may feel physically heavy, mentally foggy, emotionally unpredictable. And if you have gone through that, I want you to hear this clearly. That does not mean you're weak. That means grief is affecting you as a whole person. And when people don't understand that, they often end up fighting themselves instead of caring for themselves. They start asking, what's wrong with me? Why am I still like this? Why can't I snap out of it? Why does it still hurt this much? And the answer is often not that something is wrong with you. The answer may be that your mind, body, and heart are simply trying to process a deep rupture. And once we understand why grief hurts so deeply, we can begin to understand something else. Healing does not mean erasing the pain. Healing means learning how to live with true care, and compassion while your heart is still adjusting. Let me say that again. Healing does not mean erasing the pain. Healing means learning how to live with the truth, care, and compassion while your heart is still adjusting. So let me talk to you about something else. Healing is not the same as getting over it. See, this right here is important because many people have been harmed by the idea that healing means getting over it. Let me say this plainly. Healing is not getting over it. Healing is not forgetting. Healing is not pretending. Healing is not shutting down your emotions. Healing is not acting unaffected. Healing is not reaching some magical point where the loss no longer matters. And a lot of people need freedom from that pressure because when you think healing means I shouldn't feel this anymore, you start treating your pain like failure. And your pain is not failure. Your pain is information. It is telling you this mattered, this was real, this touched your life deeply, this changed something in you. And psychologically, suppressing grief does not make it disappear. It often makes it show up sideways. Shows up sideways as anger, as anxiety, as numbness, as overworking, as isolation, as emotional shutdown, as control issues, as irritability, as difficulty connecting, as exhaustion that doesn't seem to make sense. Because buried pain does not become harmless pain. It often becomes disguised pain. That's why healing requires honesty. That's why healing requires honesty. It does not require perfect words, not polished spirituality, not fake positivity, but honesty. Honesty says, this hurts. It says, I miss them. It says, I am not okay today. It says, I thought I was doing better, but this hit me again. Honesty says, I need support. I need grace. I need time. That is not weakness, my friend. That is emotional truth. And emotional truth is one of the first steps towards emotional healing. But grief doesn't just challenge our emotions. It often challenges our identity too. Because after loss, many people start asking questions they never had to ask before. And that leads us a little deeper. How grief can shake your sense of identity. One of the deepest wounds of grief is this. It can make you not feel like yourself anymore. Have you ever noticed that? After deep loss, people often say things like, I don't even know who I am anymore. I don't feel like myself. Something in me changed. I'm not the same person I used to be. And that is real because grief can shake your identity. See, when someone or something meaningful is woven into the fabric of your life, that loss doesn't only leave absence around you, it can leave disorientation within you. You begin asking, who am I without them? Who am I after this loss? Who am I when life doesn't look like I thought it would? Who am I if the future I imagined no longer exists? Who am I if part of me still feels stuck in the past? See, all of these are identity questions. And this is why grief has such a strong who am I feel to it. because loss can strip away assumptions. It can expose dependency. It can reveal fear. It can shake your confidence. It can confront you with parts of yourself you had not fully met before. But I want to offer this gently. Grief may change you, but it does not have to erase you. Yes, it may deepen you. Yes, it may soften you. Yes, it may slow you down for a moment. Yes, it may even make you more aware of life fragility. But sometimes inside grief, you also begin discovering things about yourself. You begin to discover your endurance, your humility, your tenderness, your capacity to survive, your need for connections, your need for God's help and presence, your need for rest, and your need for honesty. So while grief may make you feel unfamiliar to yourself for a season, that does not mean you are lost forever. Sometimes it simply means you are being reintroduced to yourself through pain. And that brings us to one of the most important truths in this entire episode. Because if grief changes you, then healing cannot be measured by becoming who you were before. Sometimes healing look like becoming whole in a new way. So let's pause right here. Take a breath. I want to ask you a few honest questions. What have you been grieving that you have not fully acknowledged? Is it a person, a relationship, a season of life, a dream, a pet, a sense of security, a version of yourself? Have you been trying to heal, or have you mostly been trying to hide the hurt? Have you been giving yourself permission to grieve, or have you been pressuring yourself to recover on other people's timelines? Do you miss them, or do you also miss who you used to be before the loss? And maybe the deepest question today is this: can I allow myself to heal honestly, even if my heart still hurts? Sit with that for a second. No shame, just reflection. Because awareness is not the end of healing, but it's often just the beginning of it. So let's talk about how you can be healing and still hurting. See, this may be the central heartbeat of this episode. You can be healing and still hurting. See, those two realities can exist at the same time. You can be making progress and still have hard days. You can be praying and still crying. You can be stronger and still feel tender. You can be moving forward and still have moments where grief grips you unexpectedly. See, that does not mean you are going backwards. It means healing is not linear. Psychologically, grief often moves in waves. You may have a few steady days, then a memory hits, a date comes around, a photo appears, a familiar place stirs something, a random moment catches your heart off guard, or a sudden scent of fragrance sparks a reminder. And suddenly, the feelings rush back. That is not proof that you failed. That is proof that grief is layered. And layered pain often heals in layers too. A memory here, a trigger there, a realization here, a release there. Healing is often less like flipping a switch and more like slowly learning how to breathe differently inside a life that has changed. And that requires patience. The kind of patience many grieving people do not give themselves because they think, I should be over this. I should be stronger by now. I should be fine by now. But healing doesn't respond well to should. Healing responds better to grace. Grace says, I am doing the best I can. This is hard and that matters. I do not have to fake my way through this. I can take this one day at a time. I can be honest about where I am. That is the healing language. So if healing and hurting can happen together, then the next question becomes practical. What actually helps a grieving person begin to heal in a healthy way? So let's talk about what healthy healing can look like. See, healing through grief does not look the same for everybody, but there are healthy patterns that can support the process. And I want to walk through these slowly. You have to give yourself permission to grieve. This sounds simple, but it is huge. See, some people were raised to suppress emotions. Some people were taught that tears are weakness. Some people learn to survive by numbing the pain. Some people became so used to being the strong one that they don't know how to let themselves be human. But grief needs room. If you never let yourself feel it, it doesn't disappear. It often waits and lie dormant. Then resurfaces in other forms. So permission to grieve is permission to be honest. You have to name what you actually lost. Sometimes people think they are only grieving the person, but sometimes they are also grieving the routine, the comfort, the future they imagine, the emotional safety they felt, the role that person played in their life. So when you can name the layers of the loss, you can begin understanding the layers of the pain. Thirdly, you have to let safe people in. See, isolation intensifies grief. Not every person is safe. Not everybody knows how to sit with pain. Some people rush. Some people preach at pain. Some people dismiss what they don't understand. But safe people matter. Safe people listen. Safe people make room. Safe people don't force you to perform. Safe people can sit in silence without demanding that you be okay. You have to take care of your body as well as your mind. See, this is important psychologically because grief is not just emotional. It can dysregulate the body. Sleep can be affected. Energy can shift. Focus can decrease. Appetites can change. Your nervous system can feel constantly on edge or deeply shut down. So basic care matters. Water matters. Rest matters. Movement matters. Breathing matters. Eating something matters. Sunlight, that vitamin D, matters. And even quiet moments matters. Because sometimes healing begins with simple acts of care that remind the body it is safe enough to keep going. we also have to release the timeline. See, healing is not a race. And one of the most harmful things grieving people do is compare their process to others. Why am I still hurting? They seem okay. I should be further along. But grief is personal. Attachment is personal. Loss is personal. Meaning is personal. So healing will be personal too. We have to find healthy meanings. This does not mean forcing a lesson too quickly. It means allowing yourself over time to ask, how do I carry this loss with purpose? How do I honor what matters? How do I keep living without betraying the love I had? How do I let this deepen me without destroying me? See, that search for meaning can become part of healing. And maybe one of the deepest fears people carry in grief is this: what if I never feel joy again? So let's talk about that. Grief does not mean joy is gone forever. One of grief's darkest whispers is this: you will always feel like this. And when you are in the middle of deep pain, that whisper can feel believable. You start wondering if the heaviness is permanent, if the ache will always live this close to the surface, if laughter will ever feel natural again, if hope will ever return without guilt attached to it. But I want to tell you something gently and truthfully. Grief may change your joy, but it does not cancel it forever. See, joy may come back differently, softer, slower, more sacred, less careless, more tender, but that does not mean it will never return. And sometimes grieving people struggle when joy darts peeking back in. They feel guilty for laughing, guilty for smiling, guilty for enjoying a moment, guilty for feeling relief, as if healing dishonors the love they lost. But healing is not betrayal. Breathing again is not betrayal. Living again is not betrayal. Smiling again is not betrayal. And laughing again is not betrayal. You do not honor loss by emotionally dying with it. You honor love by letting it shape how you live from this point forward. That's powerful, because now healing is not about forgetting. It is about carrying love forward in a new form. And that leads to one of the deepest emotional truths about grief. You are learning how to carry love and loss at the same time. And that may be one of the hardest emotional skills a human being ever has to learn. Learning, how do I carry love and loss at the same time? How do I remember without unraveling? How do I honor them without feeling crushed? How do I keep moving without feeling like I'm leaving something important behind? How do I build a future while still holding memories from the past? That tension is real. It is so real. Because grief is strange like that. It can make you want to hold on and let go at the same time. It can make you hold on to the memory, hold on to the voice, hold on to the meaning, hold on to the bond. And at the same time, life keep asking you to keep moving. And that can feel like betrayal when your heart is tender. But maybe healing is not about choosing one or the other. Maybe healing is learning how to hold both, the ache and the appreciation, the sorrow and the gratitude, the tears and the strength, the memory and the next step. And maybe that's what makes grief so sacred and so painful. It hurt because it matters. You don't grieve deeply what never touched you deeply. And if your heart still hurts, maybe that pain is not just an enemy. Maybe it is also a witness to love, a witness to meaning, a witness to the fact that your life was touched by something real. So now the question is no longer, why does this still hurt? The deeper question becomes, how do I keep living while carrying this honestly? So, to the person listening right now whose heart is still hurting, I want to speak to you carefully. Maybe you have been doing your best just to make it through the day. Maybe you have been carrying grief quietly. Maybe you don't want to burden anyone. Maybe you are tired of breaking down in private. Maybe you are frustrated that the pain still shows up. Maybe you thought you would be further along by now. Maybe you feel guilty for not being better yet. But hear me, you are not failing because you still feel pain. You are simply human. You are grieving. You are processing. You are adjusting to what your heart did not want to lose. And that, my friend, takes time. So I encourage you, be gentle with yourself. Take the pressure off you. Release the false deadlines. Stop measuring your healing by appearances. Stop comparing your heart to people who are hiding their pain in different ways. And honor where you really are. Because healing is not always dramatic. Sometimes healing is getting out of bed. Sometimes healing is taking a shower. Sometimes healing is answering the phone. Healing is eating a meal. Sometimes healing is saying, today is hard. Today is tough. Today is difficult for me. Sometimes healing is crying instead of pretending. Sometimes healing is finally telling somebody, I am not okay. Healing is breathing through the wave instead of judging yourself for feeling it. That counts. It all counts. And some of you need to hear this too. You are allowed to heal. You are allowed to live. You are allowed to laugh again, to breathe again, to feel peace again, to hope again. Not because the loss didn't matter, but because your life still matters too. That is important. Your pain matters, but your life matters. Your grief matters, but your life matters too. Your memories matters, but your healing matters too. And even if your heart still hurts today, that does not mean this pain gets the final word. So how do you heal from grief when your heart still hurts? You heal honestly. You heal slowly. You heal gently. You heal in layers. You heal by telling the truth. You heal by giving your heart permission to feel the weight of the loss. You heal by refusing to confuse pain with failure. You heal by understanding that grief is not just a wound. Sometimes it is love learning how to live in a different form. And maybe that is the deepest truth of all. Healing does not always mean the ache disappear. Sometimes healing means the ache no longer controls the whole narrative of the story. Sometimes healing means you learn how to carry what hurts without letting it destroy who you are. Sometimes healing means your heart is still tender, but no longer hopeless. And if that is where you are right now, that matters. If you are still showing up, that matters. If you are still breathing through the hard moments, that matters. If you are still trying, still praying, still hoping, reaching for peace, that matters. Because every small act choosing life in the middle of pain is a form of healing. So no, you may not be all the way there yet, but don't overlook the fact that you are still here, and that means something. It means the story is still being written. It means healing is still possible. It means grief may have wounded you, but it does not get to define the end of you. And before we go, I want to leave you with this. Ask yourself, can I give myself permission to heal, even if my heart still hurts? Sit with that, breathe with that, pray through that, reflect on that. And remember, healing is not always loud. Sometimes it sounds like a quiet breath, a whispered prayer, a truthful tear, a small step, a soft return. So before we move forward, I want you to pause for just a moment. Take a breath. Wherever you are, whatever you're carrying, this next part is for you. Let's speak life over ourselves out loud if you can. Because what we say in this moment has the power to shift how we walk into the rest of our day. Let's begin with our affirmation. I am not defined by my past or limited by my mistakes. I am growing, learning, and becoming who I was created to be. I have values beyond titles, roles, and expectations. I choose honesty over fear and growth over comfort. I am allowed to change, heal, and evolve. I walk with purpose, clarity, and courage. I am becoming more aligned with my true self every day. And who I am is enough. So as we close today's episode, I want to thank you for taking this time for yourself. If something you heard inspired you, challenged you, or made you pause and reflect, please don't keep it to yourself. Share this episode with someone who may need it. Invite them into the conversation. See, this podcast grows when we grow together. I cannot do this without you. We grow together through shared stories, honest reflections, and real connections. See, every listen, every share, every conversation helps create a community rooted in purpose, rooted in love, rooted in hope, rooted in faith, rooted in trust and truth. So until next time, keep reflecting, keep becoming, and remember, you matter. This is the Who Am I podcast, and let's walk this journey together.
Who am I? Yeah, I'm more than the pain, more than the pride. Who am I? Who am I? Walking in purpose, no mask, no disguise. This is my voice, my rise, my life. Welcome to who am I?